afternoon, we have two great examples of what happens to move all the way up to the spectrum levels. The next person that I'm going to have is going to share their story. I know when I first met Scott, he actually came on board as a change maker. I think in the very first fast forward that we ever had. And he definitely at that point was really working hard and turning around his property business. And you're going to hear about what he was doing at that point and what the steps were that he was taking. But as a result of that, one thing led to another. We're going to hear that story as well. And he ended up setting up a company with some partners called WealthE Migrate. Some of you are here as a result of WealthE Migrate as well. And if I just share here, what WealthE Migrate is riding in terms of a wave, this actually is wave 4. So wave 4, I call liquid capital, meaning that there was a time when being able to actually achieve capital value, which is something which has got asset value, you had to have money to make money. You know, only if you had money would the bank loan you money. So we had this catch-22, where if you didn't actually have money, you couldn't get started in the first place. And this wasn't just for people that were trying to start a business. This is for people that want to get into the property market. This is for people that are looking to, fund their growth as they go as well. But something really interesting has been happening recently, and it is all as a result. I mean, we see it in the likes of Bitcoin, we see it in the likes of cryptocurrency, but it goes way beyond that. It goes into crowdfunding, it goes into the whole idea of how markets, pretty much from what happened first of all with the trading markets, where you could suddenly actually trade anywhere in the world using E-Trade or using one of the trading platforms, and suddenly like everything was accessible without having to have a middleman, without having to have a credit score. You could just get going. Even as a kid, you could just get started and actually be able to then support and fund the ideas that you really like as well. So liquid capital is the fact that we are seeing this flow take place, not just in markets, but in capital itself and our accessibility to it. To the extent that the middleman disappears altogether. We will not have banks the way we have banks in 10 years from now, right? We will not even have governments the way that we have governments right now. So we're seeing this shift happen, and it's a little bit like the difference of in the old days when you actually had to build like a house for a business. You start with a business plan that you go to get an MBA to learn how to do, and it all starts with basically how do I have a house that can sit on the terrain, on the market. You know, it starts with like, here's a market report, here's the size of the market, here's the market share we're going after, right? And then here's how we're going to protect barriers to entry, protect people from coming in. It's a bit like I'm going to build the house on top of what was called the quantities, right? You have a quantity surveyor that actually surveys the quantities. Things are moving so fast now, everything's turned liquid. You can't build a house and put it in the sea and expect it to float, it's going to sink. So we've actually gone from people building houses to people building ships. It's like, how do we actually have something that doesn't protect, it projects, it moves somewhere, it's mission driven, right? And we have a whole different way of working now, which is about knowing that no matter which way the winds are going, you can always still harness the winds to go to wherever you want to go as well. So, Scott's story, you're going to hear more about it. I'm just going to share, first of all, a couple of slides which will link all of this together as well. The first slide is a simplified way of explaining what is happening with trust in the world. This, by far, is the biggest wave I've shared so far today. And it is how trust itself is getting distributed. So in the past, the only way that you could be trustworthy is because the government or the bank gave you a credit score or gave you a rating, which meant that you were actually able to be trustworthy. That no longer happens today. We give each other trust. You know, you go to Amazon, you go to eBay, and you already see the stars that we're giving each other. You go use Uber, we've seen the stars we're giving each other to say I trust this person or I don't. And we're more willing to actually hear our friends say they trust someone or don't for referral than we are to listen to some third-party authority. And so as a result of that, we are seeing this shift in the way that even currencies themselves are getting created. Blockchain technology, which is this whole idea that something can actually be tracked and verified by multiple bodies that have nothing to do with governments. So we can actually say, no, this is actually trusted. We know that this is okay. Like everything is going to be blockchain, which means my shoes will be blockchain. What does that mean? It means I can look at my shoe, I can scan it, and I can see exactly where it got made. I can see, what labor went into it, like whether there's anything unethical that happened, whether there's any materials that I don't agree with, whether someone made too much money along the line. I'll be able to see all of that. And as a result of being able to see all of that, my sense of what actual quality is and my buying decisions will change based on the entire process of how things are actually growing, as opposed to the end product where we had no idea how much we're destroying the earth or how much we're actually creating suffering for humanity. This is all part of what happens when we can trust the whole process. And we're seeing this happen not just through the way that we are going through a distributed trust as opposed to a centralized trust. We're also seeing it happen with the likes of the craziness of cryptocurrency this year. So I started talking about this 5 years ago. I said this is going to come, and when it comes, it's going to hit us really hard, and it's going to grow as well. And this is an article that I wrote not that long ago. It was when Bitcoin was at $6,000, and I was basically talking about not go buy it or go speculate. I was talking about why does it keep on growing, and why are some people saying it's worth $1 million while other people saying it's going to be worth nothing. And it has everything to do with understanding that this is not about do we trust Bitcoin. This is about do we actually still trust our own currency system. Do we actually still trust, where Bitcoin is worth the most in the world right now is Zimbabwe. Right? Zimbabwe right now, Bitcoin is worth like $20,000 per Bitcoin, right? Because people so don't trust the currency and the government and what's going on there right now that they'd rather put their money in pocket in something that actually is trusted outside of those structures. And so we're seeing this happen, that we are taking our future in our own hands and finding new ways to trade and connect with each other as well. So with this, and you're going to have a chance to ask questions you might have around all of this as well, because this is something that Scott's very involved in as well. With this, Scott set up this organization here called WealthE Migrate. In fact, I'm just going to split for a moment. I'm going to bring Scott to the stage. This is the actual website today. So the website today, if you go to it, you'll see that you actually can have your own dashboard, which actually allows you to see what are the different investments you might have a part of. It's all property related. So think of it like E-Trade for property. We can actually buy into the kind of investments that only multimillionaires could invest in before, and you're part of those projects now going forward. They're all in different countries, which is why it's called WealthE Migrate, so that you can actually then invest globally, basically from one dashboard. You can start from just $1,000, so it's actually like a very easy entry to get involved into it as well. They already are accepting Bitcoin into this as well. In the time that Scott has actually grown this, you can see the size of it, $65 million invested in the platform, 1,541 transactions made, and then you see here like how they're setting up their own wealthy coin, so they've got their own ICO that's coming up, and you see here as well the different projects, which includes our project, Entrepreneur Resort. So actually we listed our company through this platform, and everyone that invested through this platform as well. So that made it really simple and easy for people to just come in and own part of our group as we grew, and then be able to share with others as well. And these are all around the world that these are happening too. It all looks great here, but Scott's story is an incredible one because of the way you really started from nothing and grew this and created trust with investors all over South Africa and now all over the world. So can you please give Scott a big round of applause? Scott's going to join me on the stage here. Okay, you've got a lot of things you're bringing up as well.
Stuff to share.
All right, welcome Scott, welcome Scott. Let's give him another big round of applause. Come join me. Grab a seat there, I'll grab a seat here. So Scott, why don't we kick it off with a story, and everyone's going to have a chance for a bit of a Q&A afterwards as well. Let's start with how we met and the pathway that led from us meeting to the beginning of WealthE Migrate.
So it was a room a lot smaller than this, and I don't know if it was your first one or not. It was in Cape Town actually, and you invited myself and 3 others to come and talk as a change maker, which was quite an honor at the time. And so I came down for the day, and what was interesting is I sat there all day, and I was like, oh wow, this is the answers for what I need. My strategy in life's always been to work harder than everyone else. So at school I worked harder than everyone else. On the rugby pitch I was fitter than everyone else. And in business I just couldn't work any harder. Like it just wasn't getting to the next level. And when you sat there and you explained these things behind, I just got it. Like I just got it. And then the second thing for me was that I'd beaten myself up pretty much my whole entrepreneurial career, so since 2004, for not doing systems. You read that book like E-Myth and whatever, and every single year my to-do list or my goals was like, systemize, and I just never did it. And then you were like, no, it's simple, like you're a creator and you need to get a systems guy, and I was like, oh shit, why didn't I get that advice 10 years ago? So yeah, that's how we met basically. I signed up for Crystal Circle that day.
Now, when we started, and the Crystal Circle, by the way, some of you remember it already. We'll talk more about that tomorrow if you would like that, like direct mentoring. But it was actually during that time. There's a switch, which actually is one of the biggest switches that some in this room need to make as well, focusing on the product and focusing on the customer. Because at that point, you built success, first of all, selling Australian developments, and that was when IPS was just a property development company. And then when the Australian market went down, then suddenly they weren't selling to the investors anymore, and then it's like, well, how do I get this thing sold? And the whole conversation was around, no, it's not about the product, it's about the customers. They must be investing in something or want to invest in something. Find out what they want to invest in and go find that and actually give them that as opposed to what you're trying to sell right now. So share how that changed your focus and then got you into the American market instead of the Australian market.
Yeah, so there were actually 3 or 4 steps in that. I mean, we started a company in London helping South African expats invest back into South Africa. We were the first company to get all the banks to give expats 100% mortgages. Our record was 86 properties in one day sold. But yet when the market crashed in 2008, they literally changed those banking rules from 100% to 70% overnight. And we went from 400 properties in 2008 to 16 in 2009.
Right.
At the same time, London had an incredible opportunity, but you couldn't buy individual apartments. So you could buy the whole building, and you could buy buildings that were 50p on the pound,
right,
with yields, cash flow of 10, 11, 12%, but you need 10 million pounds. So I was running around trying to get all our clients to work together, and that didn't work. Then you had Australia, where it was the best performing market in 2009 in the G20. So we started investing quite heavily in Australia. But what was interesting is that because it was such a successful market, inflation went up, so they started to put up interest rates. So properties that were good quality properties suddenly were in cash flow positive. And people don't like investing overseas with cash flow negative investments. And yeah, really, you and I chatted about it, and we went out to the market and we said, well, what do you actually want? You know, at the end of the day, people actually want three things. They want wealth preservation, so they want to get their money out of South Africa and invest in a good quality asset to look after their wealth. They want a plan B for their family, and they want peace of mind. And so those are the three most important criteria. That's why they go to first world markets. And then the next thing is they want something that's going to get a decent cash flow. And so we went to America, and the cash flows in America were double, if not triple, what you could get in Australia and in England. And that fundamentally changed things, because also we were selling off-plan developments. So I'm still waiting for Harvard to call me up, because I had the worst business model in the world. Where I used to pay all my expenses in pounds up front, and then get paid my income in rands like 2 to 4 years later. And the difference in America was that they were existing houses that transferred quickly. I mean, in America it takes 30 days to transfer a house. So the cash flow was a lot quicker, which enabled us, which I think we'll get onto, to hire really incredible people, which helped us build an incredible team. Which
So I want to appreciate something about how to unlock flow in the slots, because the big challenge you had at Chicken and Egg is well, someone's not going to actually give you the money until you've got the deal, but you can't get the best deal unless people know you've got the money. So you have this chicken and egg that tends to happen with a lot of us in business as well. And the one thing we talked about is, don't get people to decide, because they can't decide yet, right? Get people to decide to decide. Get people to say, if you can find this property with this result, I will put this much money in. So effectively, it's like soft commitments, like letters of intent. It's like, I promise to promise, but you go find a deal first. So what happened was when you went to America, you were able to then say, look, I've got this many people with this much money saying, if I can get this deal, they'll put the money in. That gave you negotiating powers to developers or the agent there to say, all right, then we'll give you that discount, we'll give you a wholesale rate, and then you end up actually getting a trip out so people could actually go there, experience it, and see it. So effectively, you're not just buying retail like everybody else, you're actually going out there and putting a deal together, which is a much better deal as well.
So let's get into the dynamic. This is a bit embarrassing actually having this conversation, because there's a couple of people in the room that were part of this. But anyway, so what we did is we had a reservation system. So what normally happens with South Africans is you ask them who's keen, and 100 will tell you you're keen, and then you'll go over and you'll find 100 properties, and then most of them, their grandmother's dog needs to go to the poo. And my point being is that, so what we did is, so listen, we're not interested in doing that. You have to put down a 20,000 Rand deposit in the bank, and that's basically what we call a reservation form. And with that, we could go over to America and we could sit with the people and we say, listen, this is $2,000. Like this isn't enough money that someone's properly committed, which meant that we would be able to hold the transaction, because in America, if it's a good deal, it closes like in literally 24 hours. And it's not enough time for a South African to get the rest of the money overseas. But the 2,000 was enough of a commitment for them to then hold deals for us. Also, behind the scenes, the 20,000 Rand paid for the trip.
Right.
Whereas in the past we had actually paid for the trip, but you knew you were dealing with 10, 15, 20 serious people versus 100 maybes.
Well, I mean, this is what Elon Musk does. It's like the way he can fund a factory is going out and getting $5,000 deposits from 50,000 people. Then it's approved. These people actually want to have the product, so now I'll give you the money for the factory and then I can deliver on it. And so most of us aren't doing that, and so we kind of go in with nothing and then wonder why we can't negotiate to get the right deal. Now let's go from that to then the next part, which is what Migrate, because that was now solving an even bigger issue, which was for those who didn't even have the money to do deals like that, but it's using the same idea of we can do better deals and then bring those out to everybody. So can you share a bit about how that materialized?
Yeah, so a couple of steps back, I wrote my dissertation in 1998 at UCT on how technology was going to change the property and construction industry. and I did my master's in London on exactly the same topic. With RPS, when we were helping people invest in London, Australia, America, and even South Africa, we noticed there were three major gaps. Firstly, most people didn't even have the deposit. I mean, to buy a deposit in London 10, 15 years ago was R1 million, and most people didn't have it. Secondly, if they had it, they tended to be sophisticated, they considered themselves commercial investors, and then they couldn't afford commercial. And then thirdly, you had the type of person that actually had the money, but they didn't even know where to go, like which country, which partner, etc. So that was the first major problem that we started to notice. The second one was what I've already mentioned. In England, when the crash happened, you could buy amazing deals, but you had to buy them collectively. And even though we had thousands of clients, we couldn't get them to come together and trust each other. And that, for me, I lost a building in Wimbledon. I was like, you know, when you have that pain moment, I was like, this is ridiculous. We have to solve this problem. I'm going to build, and we didn't know about crowdfunding or anything, but it was like, we're going to build a platform to bring investors together to give them the buying power of an institution. And that sort of culminated with what we explained with America, bringing great people onto the team. So RPS started to get to your green stage over there, which allowed me to step out and actually really focus on Wealth Migrate. And my co-founder, Henny Besaidenout, you know, for about 3 years we talked about it, we dealt with all the regulations, which is really tough. But when you actually explained the waves of crowdfunding, I actually remember going to Centurion with Henny and going, it's now or never. I'm doing this, you know, no disrespect, with or without you. And so we really started to build out this solution where people could now invest in commercial property, but with very small amounts of money. And I'll give you one personal story again. In 2009, I met Henny and Peter Venstra in Sydney, Bondi Beach.
And Henny basically was doing already property investing, but the very traditional way of getting out.
Well, 100%. I mean, this is the story. So in 2009, they were in Australia buying medical buildings. Now, I'd helped about 2,500 people invest in houses and apartments, including myself. And I was like, well, why medical? And he said to me, well, think about it. No matter what happens in the economy, people need doctors. Secondly, doctors never leave their premises. And I remember sitting back going, that's actually pretty true. Like in my case, my doctor's passed on, but the premises are still there from when I was a kid. And the third thing is doctors are bloody good at being doctors, but they're not accountants, so they sign very good long-term, favorable leases. And I mean, that's like 101 property, like if you think about it. And I remember just sitting there thinking, I have an honors degree, I have a master's degree, like no one's ever taught me this. And yet it's so simple. And I said to them, how do I participate? They said, no, it's easy. It's friends and family, and it's 5 million Aussie dollars each. Oh, okay. I see the problem. Anyway, the two of them and 6 other people put in 5 million each, $40 million. Today that company is listed on the Australian Stock Exchange for 700 million Australian dollars. Which just pisses me off because I wanted to participate. But what I'm really grateful for is that we persuaded Henny, and Peter thought we were absolutely mad, although he's now a shareholder and has joined the team. What I'm really grateful for is since October 2013, I've invested in every single deal they've done, but sometimes with as little as £100,
right,
or $100.
Yeah. So we're going to get to a few questions. Can you share off the back of that? And so obviously now it's grown into a multi-million-dollar startup, which is growing pretty rapidly right now. And you this year got very involved in, okay, we got to actually, it was last year, like we've got to get this whole blockchain connected. Then with what happened with like currencies, it's like, you know what, we actually have our own kind of like wealthy point as well. Do you want to share like, you know, what was the revelation you had around the way that all of this is leading into even more liquid ability to get connected to capital that's taking down this road? So
it's a pity, I could talk for 3 days on this. You got me to come to Bali in October 2014 to Crystal Circle. And it was amazing actually, because most of us entrepreneurs have the vision very clear in our head, but we can't communicate it with anyone. And I spent 5 days there. I came back about 6 weeks later. I spent another 5 days. And we literally mapped out our 2020 vision with you and your team. And what's interesting is we then created the team charter in January 2015. And in that time, we said, there's a need to build a cryptocurrency that's based on real estate. So in this room, who owns Bitcoin in the room? Okay. Who would like to come to the front and explain to everyone else the value of Bitcoin? Now, who in this room knows the value of property? Every single person in this room. Every single person on this planet knows the value of property. So imagine if you could have a cryptocurrency with all the benefits of cryptocurrency, but based on an asset class that everyone understands. So that was actually what we wrote in the team charter back in January 2015. And there were obviously lots of steps. Our biggest barrier to entry is trust. So if people would like to see real-life blockchain, I can literally log in and show you. Because most people have heard of the concept of blockchain, they've never really seen it. Our biggest problem, if I sit with anyone in this room and I say, why would you not just put $10,000 in Australia? You'll be like, well, how do I even know it's going to get to Australia? And how do I know what I'm going to buy? Seriously, let's be honest. Blockchain solves that problem. It's distributed trust in terms of what you just said. So we were like, well, there's two reasons we need blockchain. Firstly, it's distributed trust, and it actually, and it's a word I learned from you, it's the foundation of the social commerce economy. And the second thing is that right now, the costs of moving money around is just too expensive. There's 16 different middlemen in a property investment. With blockchain, you can remove all of them. And our dream is to get investing down to $1 per person per investment, and ultimately to help solve the wealth gap. To do that, we had to get rid of all the friction costs. So in October 2016, we launched our blockchain solution. Every transaction you saw there is on the blockchain. And what was interesting is that if you'd asked me in January this year, I would have said to you, well, our cryptocurrency is coming. It's probably 5 years away, because you've got to wait for market adoption and everything else. And then in 1st of June this year, I stood on stage and someone said to me, what do you think of an ICO? And I didn't know what the acronym stood for. But when I understood it, it's basically crowdfunding 2.0. And I'd like to share a little bit around how we funded our company, because I think it's important for everyone else that there's a big list. But my point being is that we've pretty much funded our company through that, yet we can now do it on steroids. So,
and by the way, just so everyone's really clear, because a lot of people think, what is this ICO thing? It's like, it's actually quite, if you think about it, like an IPO is like listing shares, and ICO is listing effectively credits. You can call them coins, but they're really credits. So go back to the story of the oatmeal doing the games, right? So he went out and said, I've got this game, and you can all get a copy of the pack of cards. It's going to cost this much money. So then he can raise $3 million. Well, guess what? Next time he has another game, he's going to go and do it all over again. But if he says, hey, you can buy credits in all my games, right? Just buy 1,000 credits or buy 500 credits, and then that will help me to do all my games in the future. So now everyone's actually buying the credits to buy his games. Then they might buy more. That's what an ICO is. Effectively, it's crowdfunding, but for the credits to buy everything as opposed to just one thing. And if you get that, then it's like, oh, that really is crowdfunding 2.0. It means that you've got your most valued customers who really want to keep working with you in the future, and they've now got a way to actually, you get a way to print your own currency, they get a way to now actually have a super duper deal to be supporting you from all the things you're doing in the future as well.
No, look, I mean, it's the realization I had. So I think there were a lot of people asking earlier around funding. And we've tried tirelessly to get a venture capitalist on board, being part of the process, and it's actually quite difficult. Like I'm warning you, every South African out there, it's a lot more difficult for South Africans than it is if you live in America or elsewhere. However, I actually think that's our greatest asset, because we tend to say, let the Americans focus on their 300 million Americans, and we'll focus on the other 6.7 billion people. But my point being is that we basically had three things happen to us in 2014. We read a book by Mark Benioff called Behind the Cloud that I would highly recommend that you all read. It's the story of Salesforce. And in 1999, he wanted, and you actually had Salesforce as one of your companies, he said to the venture capitalist he's going to put CRM in the cloud. And I said, it's never going to happen. So he went to his clients and he said, well, would you like to participate in the company? Let's build it together. And today it's the 14th biggest technology company in the world. Secondly, for us, Henny and I had agreed to go 1-for-1 in starting the company. So I had IPS helping pay my bills, and we were building WealthE Migrate with our own capital. And Henny had more ones than me, so it was becoming a bit of a problem.
More zeros.
Yeah, exactly. And then the third thing was interesting. We never expected it. Was people would come along and say, hey, I'm interested in the medical building, but how do I invest in the platform? And we didn't have an option for that. So we launched the concept in June 2014 of Wealth Partners. And we're very grateful there's a number in the room here. And I believe it's the greatest asset we've got in the company now. Because we've now got 120 wealth partners from around the world. We've raised about $11 million US dollars. But what's really interesting is that if Roger was a venture capitalist and he'd just written me a check for $11 million, like I would firstly have to report just to Roger. And secondly, he would kind of go out to his network, but it's okay, your network might be a bit different. But my point being is that the average VC doesn't have a huge sort of real network. Whereas now you've got 120 people that are committed and, to be honest, have a vested interest to collectively win together.
Yeah.
And I've been blown away by the power of the community. Like I said, it's the most grateful thing I've got. And again, the ICO thing is really that on steroids, because now 120 can become 12,000, and become 120,000. And now you've got these global advocates all over the world that have a vested interest to not only build a great product, not only be part of an incredible community, but also to have a purposeful impact on the planet and make money at the same time. You know.
So, I mean, Scott's story is a perfect example of when you know your industry is getting disrupted from somewhere, and you know your own company is going to get disrupted. Now the question is just, is it someone else who's going to disrupt it, or are you going to disrupt it yourself, right? Which is what Scott's been doing. And others who already are developers, probably investors going, I'm coming in here too, because then it gets a critical mass. So we're just going to open this up for just a few questions. Anyone here who has a question about anything you've heard here, don't worry if the question you're kind of thinking that this might be a basic question. Like we are in a territory where the breadth of people that understand and people that don't is only like an 18-month window, right? Because it didn't even exist.
Well, I mean, I told you 4 or 5 months ago I didn't know what ICO stood
Yeah,
for.
exactly, right? So any questions?
There's a great statement for what you just said, and rather Uber yourself before you get Kodaked.
Yes. Okay, so we've got a hand up right there from.
How's it, Scotty?
How's it, Steve?
Yeah, sorry, we know each other from when we were little.
His mother's my godmother.
She's here too somewhere. She is. She's here as well. Why don't you just tell us a story about hiring the wrong or getting the wrong people on the team? Because I think that's quite an interesting dynamic that we often experience in our own businesses.
Well, I think I could safely say that's the biggest mistakes I've made so far in business. When most people start a business, you tend to hire your friends from university. You don't do any of the tests that Roger has and or others. And then also everyone thinks that they're running a communist, because it's your friends, it's really hard to lead and etc. So that, coming back to your question, Steve, that really didn't end well. In fact, I lost my best friend through that process. So I'd highly recommend not bringing friends on board unless you're very clear as to the structure and how it's going to work. And then the second thing is until I met Roger and doing profiling, you kind of just meet people and you think, hey, that's a nice person, and they could do sales, but you don't actually get the right people doing the right things, so people being in their flow. And we do 2 tests. We do Roger's test and another test called PDD. And since then, we've had such, our team is we've got your full spectrum now, all the way around. And coming back to what Steve's asking, it's amazing, I don't understand people who wake up in the morning and enjoy doing spreadsheets, but they actually exist. And equally they would die if they were on the stage talking. And the point being is no one's right or no one's wrong, you need both in the team. So what I learned, Steve, was making sure you get all the tests to get the right people. And then the last trick that I learned, which has been invaluable for me, is make people jump through as many flipping hurdles as you can. So one of the best hires I've had in recent times was we put an ad on LinkedIn. We had 96 people apply. We had the recruitment agent give us maybe 170. And at the bottom, so it was quite a long job thing, and right at the bottom was said, send me a YouTube video of why you're the best person in the world for this job. Guess how many videos I got? 2. So the one guy was like, hey, shit, you were pretty close. But the other guy, his video was amazing. And I was like, we're hiring you. And he's gone on to be one of the superstars in our company. He told me that 5-minute video took him 12 hours. Those are the people you want in your company.
Yeah.
So find ways to test people like that.
Very good. All right, thank you. Another question? Okay. Go for it.
Joshua. Tell me, with the financial regulation in South Africa, do you have to register with FSB to crowdfund?
So me and the FSB are good friends. I, myself and Kevin Allen actually started the African Crowdfunding Association. I got invited in Beijing to go to the very first crowdfunding event in China in July 2015. And I met all the other bodies from around the world. And I went online and there was nothing from Africa, not one. So I was like, well, why don't we just form it? So we formed it and we put our head above the parapet in October 2015. You were actually at the event. It was Wealth Movement 2015. And it was the first time we spoke about crowdfunding in the country. And to this day, the FSB has no regulation on crowdfunding. It falls within 3 different boxes. The good news is that we are actively engaging with them in a participatory process. One of the guys that's on our board is a guy called Paul Niederer, that actually ran ASOP, which is the oldest equity crowdfunding platform in the world. It started in Australia in 2002. And ASEC is like the FSP, and he did 300 raises, 150 million Australian dollars without one problem. And so those are the type of people we've got engaging with the FSP. But the good news is that the African Fintech Awards this year, I was presenting on stage and the guy came up afterwards and I was like, oh right, yeah, it's going to get messy. And he actually came up and he said, we actually really enjoy what you guys are doing, we want to work with you. And I fundamentally believe when it comes to compliance, the most important compliance is put your customer first. That's my opinion.
Let's kind of wrap this up with the next step. So, I mean, you're going to be having a talk on Monday, right? So people can come along and hear more about this as well. Tell us about what you're going to be sharing about and the vision you have or what's going to be happening for South African investors in the future.
So a couple of things. For me, firstly, when you look at all the examples that Roger's spoken about, I believe there's two things that really differentiate industries that are being disrupted. The first one is where the user experience is terrible, like where people just don't like the whole experience. So think about taxis, think about hospitality. And the second one is where there's a lot of middlemen and it's really expensive and inefficient. And again, taxis, etc. So the real estate industry, who here loves your real estate experience, your property experience? You love managing your properties, you love dealing with the toilets, you love dealing with management agents. No, John, I know you have from Akins, but the whole process is very inefficient at the moment, and equally it's very expensive. Our properties are paying our investors north of 8% cash on cash in US dollars. The average REIT in America is paying 4.75. We're not any cleverer than them, we just don't have all the fees. So on Monday I'm sharing the $13 trillion disruption, which is the real estate space, property space, is going to be completely disrupted in the next 10 years, I guarantee it. Whether it's us or anyone else, it doesn't matter. Secondly, we'll be talking about the exponential technologies that are going to make it happen, specifically things like blockchain and cryptocurrencies. And thirdly, we'll be sharing with people how they can actually get involved. So, who in the room would like to be able to invest right now in England, Australia, America, in commercial properties from $1,000? It's possible. You can do it right now. You can manage everything on your platform, in one place, and we can share with people how to do that. And then finally, for those that are interested, we might or might not share how they can get involved in the WealthE coin and what our wealth partners are and everything else. But
what's your time frame for the ICO when you're planning that?
So we're launching it early in the new year.
Okay.
There's been, the regulatory changes are changing every day basically. We're pretty much ready to go, but it's Christmas time now, $90.
Sure.
It's actually quite interesting. On the 15th of December, 1791 is when the Bill of Rights was voted into the Constitution of America. Today there's 122 countries around the world that have democracy because of that. And so we will be launching at least a preliminary on the 15th of December this year, because we believe it's time to democratize wealth.
Very awesome. Very cool. As you found something pretty fascinating about what you just heard in Scott's story, right? It's pretty awesome, right? Can we give Scott a big round of applause? Yeah, sure.
Guys, we're coming up to Christmas, and my two colleagues we're standing over there. Would you guys just mind standing up just quickly? We've got vouchers here. They're $100 US. They're real money. I would ask anyone in the room that wants to go and get a voucher, you can either invest it yourself or you can pay it forward. So imagine, like I often do this to an Uber driver, like here, would you like to start investing from $100? For those of you that have companies, most of you in this room, rather than paying 13 checks, imagine giving your team real assets in England, America, and Australia. We do that. And thirdly, for Roger and his team, we're happy for people in this room. If you're happy, we'll actually send out a link where every person in this room can have a $100 investment. Which means you can get the vouchers today and you can pay it forward and give it to other people, because you'll still get your own $100.
Wow. And
then people say, what's the catch? And the catch is really simple. Like, why did Uber give you a voucher? Because once you caught an Uber, you didn't want to go in a yellow taxi.
Right. All right. Well, hands up who would like one of those vouchers? Do you have enough for everyone?
I don't know if we've got enough for everyone. In terms of the pay it, guys, in terms of the pay it forward, like we've only got so many that the guys have there. on Monday, Tuesday, whenever Roger and the team put it together, we will send you all an individualized link so that you can learn and participate. Basically, like I believe we've now got members from 107 countries and investors from 46 countries around the world. Our fundamental belief is we will not solve the wealth gap unless we empower everybody. And with all due respect, no one in this room, like we all need to be empowered, trust me, we all need access like Henny has to those deals. But we actually need to help the people who are domestics at home and empower them, because then we can change the world.
Very cool. So let's do this, because most hands went up. So you guys hold on to it at the moment. I'll make sure there's an organized way before we get to the end of the day that everyone can get one of these vouchers as well. But that's super generous of you, and thank you very much again, Scott. Let's give Scott another big round of applause. Thank you, Scott.
All right, and for those of you that are sitting on the fence, I've done coaching with most of the best in the world, and this is worth it.
So take a moment and just share with someone next to you, what did you get just out of that? Because we just saw a glimpse not just into the future, but the present today. This is something that Scott started basically 5 years ago when he first came to the Fast Forward. 5 years later, this is what he's doing with his life, totally transformed where he's at. What did you get out of that conversation? Take a moment and share with someone next to you. What would it be?